I'm so excited that you took the time to join us on the next episode of Beyond the Culture. This is the show where we embrace change and challenge cultural norms and ideals. I'm your host, Dr. David M. Walker. Hey everybody, I want to welcome you back to another episode of Beyond the Culture. Now listen, before I get into my conversation today, there's a couple things that I want you to do. As you know, each week when I come on, I ask you to do me a favor. And I ask you, number one, to subscribe to the show. Yeah, just hit that button, subscribe to the show. That way, each week we come on, you'll get notified that a new episode just went live on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. So subscribe to the show. That way, when we come on, you'll get notified. And of course, the second thing I always ask is that you share the show. If you like Beyond the Culture, share with your friends. Let them know that we're on, and that way they can watch the show as well and enjoy the weekly shows that we bring to you. So now let's get ready to go beyond the culture, because I have an outstanding conversation today with an old friend. And we connected, and I invited him to come on the show. And I want to introduce you to my guest today. His name is Eugene Marshall. And Eugene, and of course we call him Gene, is the director of athletics at Hampton University. He's had an accomplished career over 37 years as a head coach and athletics director, making such notable stops at the United States Military Academy, which is West Point, Iona College, and Queens College in New York. Gene is in his 8th year as AD at Hampton U. And Gene is, and I saw this, and I didn't know this about Gene, but I got very excited. Gene is a graduate of Northeastern University. Go Huskies. He earned his bachelor's degree in business administration there, and later on, he completed his master's degree in sports leadership. And while there as an undergraduate, Gene was a member of the Huskies men's basketball team, where he played under former UConn head coach and Basketball Hall of Fame, Jim Calhoun. So I am super excited to have, my friend on the show, a former and fellow Husky, none other than Gene Marshall. Gene, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. It was great to hear your voice last couple days ago, and then I happened to look and saw that you had some Husky in you as well. So
yeah. I was blessed about 5 or 6 years ago to go there to earn my doctorate. That's yeah, and it was great having that experience of going up there and becoming a part of the Northeastern family. And as I was doing my homework on you, I saw that you went to Northeastern, and the reason why it was such a surprise to me, because I know you from Brooklyn.
That's right.
I know you from Brooklyn, Pratt Institute. I know that you coached at Staten Island, both the men's and the women's team, and then as being an NCAA referee. We've passed each other on several of your steps, Iona and Army. And so that's where I know you from. I know you're from Brooklyn, but I want you to tell us, because since you did go to Northeastern, I need to know where you're from and where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Hackensack, New Jersey, where I still have a home, and my family's there, and my wife and I went to high school together.
Okay.
And played basketball at Hackensack High School, and my coach was a Hampton graduate. Didn't even think about Hampton at that time. So I went to Northeastern, was an average player for Coach Calhoun, got hurt in a fraternity accident.
Wow.
And so my career ended. But Coach Calhoun and I developed this relationship where we would always talk basketball, even as a freshman. And so he said, hey, would you mind helping me out? And at that time, they didn't have strength and conditioning coaches. They had just former players. So I worked the team out. He and I played or ran marathons together after that, and kept our relationship going, and graduated from Northeastern in 1981 with a bachelor's degree, business administration management. and had an opportunity to work for IBM
Okay.
up in Massachusetts. Then I came down back home, worked in New York. I worked in Long Island, Uniondale and Jericho. Then I moved to Manhattan. In the meantime, probably around 1985, there was an opening at Pratt Institute for a assistant coach. So between my high school coach and Coach Calhoun calling, at 26 years old, I became a head coach at Pratt Institute, replacing Ron Brown, who
Yeah, I
was a
remember
longtime
Ron.
friend who we
Yeah.
talk every other day. We've been friends for 37 years. And so um, I enjoyed that. I worked at IBM for 3 years and coached some great young men. May not have been the best basketball players, but they went on to do great things. We have authors, writers, comic book people, successful architects, businessmen. Um, but we were able to at least get them to be competitive. So, and then 1988, uh, I became the athletic director. So at 29 years old, I became the athletic director. 26 years old, I became a college head coach. Stayed there for 8 years as the AD and 11 years as the head coach. And Brooklyn kind of adopted me. Ray Haskins was on my staff at one time, the late Pedro Violet. Um, all those wonderful people just took this guy from New Jersey and made him part of their own. So there was an opportunity to go to Staten Island. They were moving to a new facility. They wanted to have an athletic director that had a vision, had a business sense. So I was recommended for the position by Larry James, who was an athletic director at Stockton. And so I went there. But a funny thing during the interview, I had references. I had Coach Conaseca because of his relationship with Pratt, and then I had Coach Richie Adebato, of course, Coach Calhoun. So they called Coach Adebato, who at that time was the head coach of the Orlando Magic,
Okay.
and they were playing against the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs.
Wow.
So he told me this story, and then a couple of people on the committee. They called him right in between practice, after shoot around practice and before the game. So of course he said he wasn't going to take it, but it was because of me. And so he went and told him and talked to him about it and said, "Look, I got to go because I got to plot against Michael Jordan," and that kind of blew their mind. So I went there, and then Edgar Gurtado, who was the head of officials,
Yes.
was my high school referee.
Wow.
We go back to the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And what he asked me to do, he says, "Look, Jeannie, you're not coaching anymore. Why don't you evaluate officials for me?" So Paul Lizzo, my friend from LIU and mentor, we would do that. Well, I had to take over the women's team a couple games into the season at Staten Island. It didn't affect me being an evaluator, but it was funny because I had never coached women before. But we went on to have an undefeated CUNY season and won the CUNY tournament, went to the NCAA. And then we went back the following year, and then I was able to turn that position over to Marguerite Gualatari, who was who was the head coach at LIU at one time, and Paul Lizzo had recommended her. I had an opportunity to go back home and work at Ramapo College up in Mahwah. Their program struggled a lot, and I really didn't want to go, but I figured I'd give it a shot. So after 2 years at Staten Island, where I was the AD and head women's coach, I went up to Ramapo. Just before the semester started, the women's coach resigned. So I ended up coaching the women's team again. And we made the team very competitive. We also improved our academic rate, graduation rate, and our programs won championships. We built programs there. We built the facility. I stayed there from 98 to 2005. Uh, Kevin Anderson, who was an old friend, became the athletic director at Army. And so I went up to his press conference because it wasn't that far away. And then we talked. And then we were trying to get him another person to go up with him. And for some reason, the person backed out at the last minute.
Wow.
So he said, I didn't want to do this, but would you come up with me? So I said, I'd do it. So I didn't have to move, just like I didn't have to move when I was at Pratt. Once I moved back from Boston in '84 to work for IBM, I didn't have to move out of New Jersey. I just drove. So I drove to Pratt, drove to Staten Island, drove to Ramapo, drove to West Point. So I stayed up there with Kevin for about 5 years. We had a great time. We built the program, did a lot of great things. The success that you see in Army football now is a byproduct of some of his work by educating the Army administration, who changes every 5 years.
Sure.
The importance of making sure your football program is competitive, not losing your military, your academics, and your Army know-how, but you still need to be competitive. And they got the right coach and the right system, and they put the kids in the right conditions to be successful. During that time, we had a great coach named Maggie Dixon, who was Jamie Dixon's sister.
Yeah, I remember her. She passed away from,
Right.
I think, breast cancer, maybe.
But she had a heart arrhythmia.
Right. I do remember her.
And she was one of the bright spots. She had worked on Doug Bruno's staff at DePaul. Kevin and I did a search. When I got there, we had to move on a coach. So for about 3 months, I was the interim women's coach. And I developed a great relationship with the young ladies who I still have to this day. And so when we did a search for the head coach, we found a person that fit the personality that they needed. They needed a sister at this particular point based on everything, but they needed somebody they respected.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to hire her, but she had no head coaching experience. Dave McGarity, who used to be in Marist,
That's right.
was working for the MAC conference in Ohio. He came in for a football game, and myself and Bob Barrett and Kevin worked on him, and he became her associate head coach. So we had a great coaching staff. We won, and then unfortunately she passed away after we took the team to the NCAA tournament for the first time. And then Dave took over. And so Dave ran it from that point. Unfortunately, the person that I had mentored at Ramapo and took over for me passed away.
Okay.
So the president of Ramapo, because my son was going there at the time, said, would you come back? So you hired everybody.
That's an AD.
Yes, when I go back to my old job, because I hired everybody. Everybody that's there I knew. So I went back. And I went back for a year, and I enjoyed it. And then there was an opportunity to go to Iona. And I was there for 2 years. They had two different presidents, great leaders. Didn't exactly see eye to eye. We were successful, but I also got sick at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I had pneumonia, which, as an athlete, you just keep. And so it got to me. So I took some time off. And an old friend of mine, China Jude, was the vice president in AD at Queens. And I was getting ready to come down here because Joe Taylor, who was a successful football coach at Hampton, had asked me if I wanted to be AD back in 2006. And I said no. My former president at Ramapo, Rodney Smith, came back down here as the vice president. He asked me in 2008 and 2011. And I said no, because I wanted my kids to get out, my last son to get out of high school. Because I didn't want to move my kids. I didn't mind driving all over the East Coast, but I did not want to move the family. Too many families were moved around because of the father or the mother's career success.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that. And I probably missed out on a lot of other opportunities, but I just did not want to do that. And so
let me jump in here because you've given us several stops on your journey, and everywhere you went, because you talked about Army, and then how Army, their football program became much better during your tenure there. You then also brought up Iona, and I'm pretty sure you were the AD there those 3 or 4 years that Iona was going to the NCAA tournament. I think it was the first time that at least Iona, but maybe even a mid-major got a, what do you call it, at-large bid.
At-large, yes. That was my first year. Yep.
Absolutely. So you've done so many great things, and of course now you're down there at Hampton, and you're doing a number of excellent things, and we're going to get to Hampton in just a minute. But I want to ask you, how do you feel about, what you've done? Listen, if each program was already doing well before you got there, then I could say, well, it's the program. But it seems like every time you arrive somewhere, in some way or another, you've put your hand on it to help turn programs around. How does that make you feel?
Well, it's a good feeling, but I'm blessed.
Okay.
Because I'm blessed because I've had mostly good and great supervisors who've had confidence in me. I've had great staffs who believed in me, and the student athletes believed in me. And because of the training of my parents, my coaches, I tried to bring a family type atmosphere to each institution.
Okay.
And so that we are one. The student athletes I tried to treat like they were my own kids, and I got that from coaching. And from my days at Pratt, how my players, how close they were. Matter of fact, my players were at my wedding.
Wow.
And so they're like family. And I try to have what I call myself as the father of 350 kids. Okay. Now, there's some days they don't like that. And there's some days they love them. But at the end of the day, they know that I'm going to try to do what's right and best for them.
For them, sure.
It may not be what they want for themselves, but that's what I try to do. And I've been very blessed. I mean, just to digress to Pratt a little bit, some of the success that we had with the student athletes that we had was a direct relationship with the coaches I had, from Pedro, who was a drill master, who worked him to Ray Haskins, who knew how to take what we had and make them really achieve at a higher level, to Les Pilgrim, who was the fundamental guy. So when you look at that, I was blessed to be able to have those. When I went to Staten Island, Paul Lizzo had just retired from LIU. And since he was a great mentor to me, I took him with me. And we took a team that we didn't know the players, and we won. And I did the same thing at Ramapo. But the one thing that we stressed was academic success. Each place, the student athletes graduated. We had academic improvement. We won championships at West Point. We won a lot of championships in a lot of different sports. I was a sports supervisor for hockey. I was a sports supervisor for lacrosse, rifle, tennis, golf. In New Jersey, my home, I have a bunch of rings from them. But more importantly, we built relationships.
Right.
We got people to do things that they were uncomfortable because they believed in us. And then we were able to get them to donate money because they saw what we were trying to do. We were able to build, renovate the old Pratt Athletic Center, those buildings in Staten Island. We were able to redo the Bradley Center over in New Jersey. So all those things are academic programs at Ramapo, around 50%. When I left, it was 75.
Okay.
We were negative 65 in wins when I got there. By the time we left, we were positive 150.
Wow.
Plus we set the stage for men's basketball to go to the Elite Eight, Sweet 16 on numerous occasions. And many years later, the same coach that I hired took the team to the Final Four. Baseball and softball took their teams, super regionals, and then those same coaches that I hired went to the World Series. A track coach that I hired right out of Northeastern, right out of college. His father was a pastor of the church that I grew up in. He moved on to Towson, but he was able to get a national championship high jump, develop that. So those are the things that make me feel good, because we put the right people in the right place in the right conditions. When we went to Iona, Tim Cluse was a great coach.
Yes, he
was. He had some great kids. I was able to let him do his thing, but when he needed me, I was available. When the kids needed me, when the kids on the team needed somebody to talk to that looked like me, I was there. And Tim allowed that to happen. He didn't feel as though I was undermining him or upsetting his program. When I could get on them in a way that only somebody that looks like me can do, they responded.
Right.
And those are the things that go unnoticed. That's what I take great pride in. And I could talk to those young men and young women, and my daughter played at Iona at the time too, could talk to them and say, hey man, knock that off. This ain't what we do here.
Absolutely.
And we had some characters. We had Glover, we had Machado, we had Momo Jones.
Wow.
But at the end of the day, love those guys.
Sure.
And we did good things. And we had another guy that I had to get on his butt because he wasn't doing well in school, and got a hold of his mother. And his mother, Taj Ridley. And his mother got on him. He didn't realize that his high school coach, Johnny Mathis, was a longtime friend of mine.
Wow.
So he couldn't dance around. And he went on and got his degree and is doing great things.
Wonderful.
So that's how I feel. Those are the things I feel good about.
Let me ask you, what has been the hardest part about being, an athletics director for you and an athletics administrator? What's the hardest part about that?
The hardest part is to get people to understand what we really do. Mm. Most people think all we do is roll out the balls and it's fun and games. They don't realize that we run a multi-million-dollar academic enterprise where we have to maintain, upkeep, and operate facilities. We have 350 student athletes that we have to care about. We have 17 sports with different rules, regulations, conferences. We have a budget that we have to stay within. And by the way, we need to matriculate and graduate these student athletes and try to keep them out of trouble. And so people think, oh, all you do is go to games. That's all you do. You go to games, you sit there and watch games. Well, those games have to be administered. They have to be set up. They have to be operated. They have to be funded. Travels have to be funded. And I think that they don't realize that this is a business. And when you look at a college campus, every area on the campus we have in this building, from marketing, promotions, sports information, to development, raise funds, to facilities, academics. At Hampton, I'm fortunate enough to report to the president through the chancellor and provost. So I'm on the academic side of the house. I sit on Dean's Council with all the academic deans, and I sit on the academic leadership team, so that they know that our student athletes are treated just like the rest of the students, and that they have done everything in their power to help our students to graduate and do well. But I think people don't really understand. And then the other part of it is, we as African-American ADs, male and female, at times don't get the credit that they deserve. because in most cases, we're not working with millions and trillions of dollars like our other counterparts.
Right.
We have small budgets, small things, and we do a lot. And I don't think you get that notoriety, which will help you to land one of those big positions. If you look at what we did at Pratt, Staten Island, Ramapo, Iona is getting a lot of publicity now because Rick Pitino's there. He's doing a great job. Matt Grabowski is the AD. He's doing a great job. He was there when I was there. But Tim Cluse did a lot with a little. Chuck McBreen, who's at Ramapo, has done an exceptional job for 24 years. He's probably the second or third winningest coach in New Jersey. Tony Batosa, who retired from College of Staten Island, played there as a Hall of Fame player and a Hall of Fame coach. He won for 20-some years. You know, those are the things that I look at, take great joy. Dave McGarity, along with Maggie Dixon, did a great job in turning around the women's program and also set a precedent that the respect that the women's programs receive at West Point, I think is a direct correlation in what Maggie Dixon was able to do in her 8 months, or really 6 months there, by galvanizing the Corps of Cadets and also showing that women's basketball was important, which made the other women's sports, which I can say as a sports supervisor for a lot of the women's sports, did a phenomenal job when I was there. I mean, we went to the NCAA tournament every year. I was on planes every year going with different teams to the NCAA tournament.
Wow. You know, that's awesome what you just said, because, you know, so many people don't understand, you know, what an athletic director does. And especially, you know, at a historical Black college, you're not going to have all the, as you use the, you went up to trillions of dollars, but you're not going to have the money, you know,
right.
like so many other PWIs, predominantly white institutions have, mainly because of alumni and endowments that all of these big schools have, you know, a multi-million-dollar, again, alumni that they have, that you get a lot of support. But as you said, historical Black colleges and universities do a great job with what they have to work with. And I know things are getting better, but yes, you do an outstanding job. For those of you who just joined in, you're joining our show Beyond the Culture, and you're listening to Beyond the Culture with my guest today, my good friend, Mr. Eugene Marshall. So Gene, we brought up HBCUs, and of course we know that that's historical Black colleges and universities. And I want to ask you something, because every episode, every time I have a conversation, I have a part of my question where what I call change and challenge. You know, I always have a change and challenge question where I talk to my guests about embracing change and challenging cultural norms and ideals. And I want to ask this question here of you, because when you got to Hampton, as part of your plans and your outreach and your vision, you challenged the system. And you know exactly where I'm going when I say you challenge the system. You embrace change and you challenge cultural norms. Well, I'm sure somebody's saying, well, what did Gene do? Well, Gene went down to an HBCU, which is an all-Black college, and he had a vision of moving Hampton University out of a historical Black athletic conference, which was the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference, and you took them to the Big South Conference. And so I want to ask you to describe the process behind that. And I know you couldn't have made that move, you know, on your own, because, you know, you have to, the president, I think his name was President Harvey at the time. And I know that there's alumni and governing board. So you have to connect with a lot of people and get permission and collaborate, but it was still your vision. At least you definitely were part of it. And I want to ask you about that process. Describe, where did the idea come from, and what was the process in order to make that happen?
Well, that goes back to our visionary president, Dr. William R. Harvey, who is going to retire in June after 44 years of stellar service. He envisioned his university to be one of the best mid-sized or modest-sized universities in the country, black or white.
Okay.
We all know that Hampton is a historically black college university, just like we all know that I'm an African-American athletic director. Mm-hmm. That's never going to change, but it doesn't mean that we can't position ourselves to be as competitive or even more competitive than predominantly white institutions. So he had that in his head for many years, and he was trying to do that. And I think where he and I met is that I had experience at predominantly white institutions, so I understood it. And I understood the challenges that African Americans face because I live it every day. Mm-hmm. And I had many years of athletic and coaching experience. Sure. So when I came down, that was his marching order to me. How can we do this? And so we looked at many conferences. We had a couple of other conferences that were interested in us. But before we did that, we started the first men's lacrosse program at historically black college university. So that was step number one. But before he did that, he had a co-ed sailing program since 1995, around the same time that he joined the MEAC, that really has predominantly, maybe 90% are European student athletes competing. He had an equestrian program. So he had already, in his mind, had that going. So the alumni, of course, were probably not as happy because they were comfortable in the MEAC. They did not see the business plan. They saw the emotional plan. And a lot of times it's hard to get them to put on their business hat when it comes to their alma mater because there's an emotional tie, an emotional pull. But it was a move for another move. This was a chess move. Going to the Big South was a move in order for us to move out of the MEAC and into a predominantly white conference that would set us up for the move that we just took, going to the CAA. So we caught a lot of flack for that. And me being the point person for athletics, I caught a lot of flack.
Sure.
It comes with the job. But I think the vision was clear that we had to move so that we could be visible and viable for other conferences to look at us. Now, there may be another conference that could leave a historical black conference for a predominantly white conference high level right away. The other thing is what people miss the point. This is not about Hampton moving to a predominantly white conference. It's about HBCU institutions having their choice.
Gotcha.
Having their own choice to dictate their own future and create their own narrative. I don't want any institution, especially HBCU institutions, to leave because Hampton left. I want them to stay where they should stay. Go if they need to go. Because it's not about that. It's about choice. For many years, we didn't have a choice. We weren't given a choice.
Right.
For 30 some odd years, we weren't accepted as a member to be a member of the CAA.
Right.
Well, effective July 1, 2022, we will be a member of the CAA.
That's the Colonial Athletic?
Colonial, yep.
Okay.
So we've made 2 moves in 4 years. But that's where he wanted to be. That was his goal 30 some odd years ago when he went from Division II to Division I MEAC. That was his goal. Now, Hampton was ready to do that, but society and the former commissioner would not accept it. I met with him when I came here. I met with the current commissioner. It took us 6 years to make it happen, even before we moved to the Big South. But we made a move that's going to show what Hampton University is about. Hampton University has 4 satellites flying right now. They have the largest cancer proton treatment center in the country, and probably around the world, one of the best. Now, not many predominantly white institutions have that. We have a weather station that on top of one of our buildings that lets us know when a storm comes up to a couple of miles away. So we're doing things that other institutions do, black or white. So that was his goal. Hey, Hampton is one of the best mid-sized universities in the country. Why can't we be in one of the better conferences in the country? Not saying anything about, it's not about HBCU or not.
Right.
So I think that was the goal, and that's why we did it. And I think that our alumni, after a while, they embraced it. They understood what we were trying to do. We're not running away from who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We embrace who we are. We love who we are, but we're going to better ourselves, and we're going to put ourselves in a position to have more exposure. And so that was the reason behind it. It took some time. We also, in the meantime, started a women's triathlon program. We're the first HBCU Division I to have a women's triathlon program. So he believes in being the first. He believes in trying to make positive change. And so that's kind of what we did, but it was his leadership. Yes, I did the heavy lifting, and without that support and the support of my chancellor and provost, we couldn't have done it.
You know, and first of all, that's outstanding. The fact that the president had that had that vision, and then you came along, and I love the term you used, did the heavy lifting, to get it done, and that's awesome. And I would also add, because I know you talked about the lacrosse, and did you say something about rowing?
Triathlon.
But something else you said earlier.
Lacrosse, sailing.
Mm-hmm. And so I would say that that's also has helped. That move has helped you with like diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
And talk about that, because I know sometimes as a Black culture, we definitely want to support our people and whatever we're doing, but we still need to understand that diversity and inclusion is important for us as well as we want others to understand it.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of sitting on both sides of this.
Okay.
Working at a predominantly white institutions, I hired minority people, okay, talented people. So I always had a diverse staff wherever I was able to work. I sat on the NCAA's Minority Opportunities and Interest Committee, which provides opportunities for minorities, not only to get jobs, but also education. I was one of the people that, when we had the Native American mascot issue in the early 2000s, where we stopped that from going on, and we had other institutions change their names. This was before recently. Then we had the Confederate flag issue, where we stopped people from competing. I was there when they took down the flag in South Carolina and Atlanta. I was on this committee. So we've been doing this social change for a long time. I also served as a founding member of the Minority Opportunities Athletic Administrators Association, MOA, and I was president of the Black Coaches Association. So we've been doing this for a while.
Okay.
Now, when you look at coming to an HBCU, Dr. Harvey has always had a diverse student body population. International students play a big part. Our tennis program was one of the best in the country, for even Division II and Division I, and they had a lot of international students. Our sailing program is second to none. We have international students there. When our volleyball program was winning, we had student athletes from Croatia. So Hampton's whole goal is to provide great education. One of the reasons we started Men's Lacrosse is to have a diverse population of students eventually to come to Hampton. Lacrosse student athletes are excellent students. So we want to have good students here. And we wanted to start the women's soccer program to kind of see if we could get some of the South America, Central America type student athletes to come.
Okay.
And we did the same with women's triathlon. So we've been trying to do that to find the best students. We know we're HBCU, we're a legendary HBCU, but we also know that we are a great institution of higher education that provides value to their student athletes and students' education. So why not have other students come? My staff right here at Hampton is very diverse. My coaches are very diverse.
Good.
So and people, if they go to a lot of HBCUs, the staffs are diverse. And that's what folks don't understand.
Right.
One of the things that we're fighting for now, and we fought 20 years ago, was for a senior minority administrator, which is equivalent to a senior woman administrator. We want to have a minority person, male or female, that's of senior status at the table, helping to make decisions. This is something that we tried to do 20-some years ago, and they brought it back up. Because if you want to have diversity, you want to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. Mm-hmm. You got to have somebody in the decision-making positions that look like us, that can be objective in what they're trying to do. The other thing that we're doing, and I'll let the cat a little bit out of the bag. We have a group of folks that are called Victory Sports that are trying to develop a Black College National Championship for men's and women's basketball teams, Division II and III, as a way of, hey, if you don't make it to the NCAA championship or you get out in the first round, that you can play for something that's meaningful. Because if you think about it, very few of our institutions make it to the semifinals, the Sweet 16, Elite 8. Mm-hmm. So if we can develop a tournament that's going to give some of the exposure as the All-Star game, and I give Travis Williams a whole lot of credit for what he did. And one of our administrators, Dr. Paula Jackson, was on that committee. The notoriety that was provided by that event is going to help a lot of these young people, not only in basketball opportunities, but in life and career opportunities in general. We want to do the same thing.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, because some of our audience may not know, this past weekend at the in New Orleans at the Final Four, or at least surrounding the Final Four, mm-hmm. They had the HBCU All-Star Game, and it was on television. There were interviews. There was representation for HBCUs and their athletes as well as their coaches. Mm-hmm. And now that you brought that up, I want to ask you about this, because I also read a recent article, and an article was talking about how Hampton AD Eugene Marshall started pushing for more Black college coaches 20 years ago, and it's still his mission. And you were part of a group of, and I believe it was a diverse group of people who came together, and you came up with the creation of E-Racism. That's the term, yes. E-Racism, mm-hmm. which is a social inclusion movement committed to bringing forth change through education, awareness, and action. You partner with current and former college basketball coaches who are leading the way. So the question is, how has the movement gone, and are you seeing any significant changes where Black coaches are getting opportunity at other institutions, not just HBCUs?
I do. the racism was part of the old College Insider, the CIT.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Dwyer and Angela Lento
Okay.
set this up. And if you look at what they've done, they have McClendon Awards, they have Lou Hudson Awards, they have all of the diverse people. They go back Cleo Hill Awards. They are what we need to be. So we decided to do something in light of the George Floyd murder. We
Mm-hmm.
wanted to erase racism.
I love
That's
it.
basically what it is, eracism. And so when the BCA kind of stopped and these other groups kind of got together, this is a perfect opportunity to show our support. And I think there is some change. More African American male and female head coaches have come out in the last 2 years. And I'm really happy to say that a lot of female African American head coaches have attained power positions and Power Five jobs.
Mm.
And I think this is going to continue. We're pushing the issue in a different way. And we had shirts, we had games. This is just a continuation of what we did 20 years ago.
Right.
And my thing is, it took a hiatus. There was a time when we had with Richard Lapchak, Floyd Keith, myself, Stan Wilcox, Stan Johnson, we had a report card on the hiring process of athletic directors and men's and women's basketball coaches and football coaches. And institutions, we graded them. And the reports were in USA Today. And that's one of the reasons why search firms became very important, because they put distance between the institution, because the search firms run it.
Mm-hmm.
But we did that, and then it kind of died down. Now it's picking back up again. And I think it needs to happen. And I think what we're doing is we're putting a group of names and a face with the movement. And so, and I say this quite a bit, I'm 63 years old right now. We've been doing this was 20 years ago. I don't want to be 83 in 20 years, and we're still where we are.
Right.
So that's our struggle. That's our fight. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that I was at the forefront of this 20 years ago. They just think that I'm at Hampton and I moved Hampton from an HBCU to a white conference to another white conference. And because I was at white institutions, they think that that's how I assimilate. That's not.
Mm.
My whole purpose is to do what's best for Black coaches, Black student athletes, and put them in positions to be successful in life. And if more exposure means to move them left or move them right, we're going to do that, because at the end of the day, we're in the business of education. And education is not just in the classroom. Education is in the field. It's in athletics. And what better way to highlight your students is through your athletic program? Because I always say that athletics is the front porch of a university because of the multi layers of opportunity for visibility that you get, free visibility. And so, we fight for that, and we're still fighting for that. And we're going to fight for equal opportunities for all of our student athletes, for our coaches, because there are a lot of talented coaches. And this even extends to the officials.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, how long you labored in the regular area as opposed to your counterparts who had same or less talent and rapport and ability to get along and deal with coaches than you did rise to the occasion. I bet you if you look at the number of times you've given people technicals in your career,
Mm-hmm.
it's far lower than most officials, because you had a way of disarming coaches. Coaches always left your games feeling good. Even they may not have disagreed, they may not agree with the call,
Mm-hmm.
but they respected the person. And that showed the love of the game. So I look at all that, and that's kind of what we do. We're looking at the whole picture.
For those of you that just joining in, my guest today on Beyond the Culture is Eugene Marshall. He's the director of athletics at Hampton University, and we're having an outstanding conversation. Gene, I want to move to a question because you've done so many great things. Without question, the resume is stellar, sterling. What other adjective I can I can throw in there about your career? But I do want to ask you this. You've helped so many people. You've done so many great things. But is there something that you have a regret about? Something you didn't accomplish? Some person you didn't help? Something that you can think of and said, if I could have done that over again, I would have done it different. So is there a regret, a big regret that you have about anything?
I think probably, I would say in coaching, sometimes you learn a little bit more. And so I would say that if I had a chance to coach again, I probably would have a different style than I did.
Okay.
I think I was successful, but I think you learn more.
Right.
You mature and you learn. I think I wouldn't call it a regret, but I think at times I've been overlooked for other positions because A, I spent some time in Division III, and B, being at an HBCU. I don't regret either place. I think we all have a place to make a difference. But I think that I may not be the sexiest name, but I may be the most prudent and efficient. And I think in this day and age, efficiency and prudent does not equate. And I think that's probably, what you deal with. I've been blessed to be able to do what I've done to help the people that I've helped, and hopefully to do that a little bit longer before I decide to jog off in the sunset. But I don't call it regrets. I just, there are certain things that you see. And, I think that I take the other thing I take great pride in. There's a lot of folks that are ADs today that we mentored, and that are Power 5 ADs today that we mentored and we had a lot to do with. And so to me, that's paying forward. And now their challenge is to pay forward as well. And I can say that they're doing that.
What advice would you give to someone who's wanting to pursue an athletic director's journey?
I think you got to realize you got to be willing to work long hours. You might start off with not a lot of pay, not a lot of glamour and glory. Get into it for the right reasons and find a niche. Because I think a lot of mistakes that people make is they look at the end result and not the process. You got to look at the process. You have to realize that a lot of times you have a thankless job, that the only comment you get are negative. The only time people want to say things is when they got a problem or when they don't like what you said or what you do. Everybody knows how to do your job better than you do.
Absolutely.
I always say there's three people on a campus that everybody thinks they can do their job better than: the president, the athletic director, and all of the head coaches.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows how to do the job.
How to do their job, right? Wow. Well, Gene, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you.
But before we close, I want you to, where can our listeners connect with you, on social media? Just I know, listen, don't email Gene, talk about, how to be an athletic director. But I'm just even if you just give the school's website, anything that you want to give, so anyone that wants to connect
No,
with
they can look at our website in the station in the staff directory, and they can reach out to one of my assistants, and they'll get it to me. My email is not on there. I am on LinkedIn. I do get on Twitter. And so if you see Eugene Marshall from Hampton University, that is me. And I'd be happy to answer questions, do what I can, because I'm here because of the Art Eastons in the world, the Charlie Tituses of the world, or Mel Hendersons, the Jim Calhouns, Joe Delgados, and those folks who looked out for me. And I go back to Coach Calhoun. He said, this was a long time ago. There's a lot of, when I was coaching Division III and thinking about what I was going to do next, he says there are a lot of Black assistant coaches. There's not a lot of Black ADs. He says if something comes along, you need to take it, because there's not a lot there. And it came along. So those are the people that have helped me. Fraternity brothers who you sacrifice a lot, wife, kids, because it's a lot of traveling, as you did, and so there's a lot of people that my parents, there's a lot of people that have helped me along the way and sacrificed for me to allow me to do this. And as my younger brother would say, I never had a real job after I left IBM. So he said, it'll work.
It takes a younger brother to say something like that.
Yes.
Well, Gene, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And as I say to all my guests, you have gone beyond the culture, and I thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and let's stay in touch.
We certainly will.
All right.
Now, if you want to continue to hear inspiring interviews like the one you heard today, I want you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform. Also, rate the show and please leave a comment. I would also love it if you would share this podcast with your friends to let them know that we're on. Finally, you can email me at beyondtheculturepodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. This is your host, Dr. David M. Walker, and we'll talk again on Beyond the Culture. Take care.